Welcome to my new series, A Scientific Approach to Learning Trading. This is the very first installment of the series, but there will be more to come. I got this idea after reading the book, The Science of Rapid Skill Acquisition. It's a book that talks about how to learn something faster, basically. And I thought, what if I could use this to learn trading faster and better, maybe? We're going to use this book's framework for skill acquisition and we're going to apply it specifically to trading. Hopefully, this will maximize learning while minimizing the time that it takes. And we're also going to reference a few additional sources from different scientific journals and external sources as we go along the way. And I want to point out that this is not a course. I am not some kind of expert that is teaching how to trade because I am also learning how to trade. This is just an experiment. In the book, they talk about 4 different stages of learning. And no matter what you're learning, you go through these 4 stages. The very first one down here is unconscious incompetence. So this is when you first start learning a thing and you don't even know what you don't know. Sometimes you even think you know, but you don't know. So this is where everybody starts, and it takes a while to get out of here. The next step is conscious incompetence. This part I find to be like one of the most painful and uncomfortable stages of learning. Right here, you realize the mistakes that you're making, you realize what you're doing poorly, you realize how far you are away from your goal, but you also don't have the skills to get there quite yet. So it can be like an annoying and uncomfortable place, but at least now you know that you're missing pieces and you can try to fill those pieces. And the third step is conscious competence. So right here, you know how to do things. You have the skills, you have the knowledge, but it still takes like a lot of focused energy in order to do them correctly. You still have to think about it in order to do it right. And finally, we have unconscious competence. So this is like you can do it in your sleep. You don't have to do anything special in order to get it right. And the way that I would describe the difference between these two, I believe when it comes to trading, is like here in conscious competence, you can trade correctly, you can be profitable, but you still have to have a lot of things like lined up and you have to have things a certain way in order for you to be able to trade well. Like, for example, you can only trade well maybe in certain markets and you can't trade well in other markets, or maybe like on a day when you're stressed out, you can't trade very well. But over here in unconscious competence, no matter what's happening in the world, you can still trade. It's very easy. That's what I think is the difference. So how does this apply to trading? The way that I see it is that in order for us to go from unconscious competence to conscious competence, which is like the first step that we have to make, we have to learn to see the market. We have to learn to like take the chaos of the market and make some sense out of it. And then once we can see the market and we kind of sort of understand what's going on in the market, then we need to learn when to enter and when to exit. And that's kind of, that I guess would be, we can trade and we're profitable trading at that point if we know how to do both of these things. So that would be conscious competence. And then I think the final phase is really the psychology of trading. And you probably need some psychology in here as well. But the final piece that makes you a great trader is having that psychology piece. So let's look at these stages. So when we learn to see the market, this is before you really are trading anything and you don't see the market clearly. And so what you need is a lens that you can look through in order to view it. And this lens serves as a tool that helps you visualize what is happening and it helps you bring clarity to the chaos. So for me, I find that the tool or the lens that I found helpful to look through when learning to see the market is price action. Once I learned price action, learned about it and learned how it works, it made it easier for me to understand the market. But I know that there's lots of different ways, like price action is not the only way. It is not the only lens or tool. It's just one of them. You just need to find one that makes sense to you. And when you look at the market through that lens, the market makes sense. The next is learn when to enter. So you must learn and then practice how to find the best setups and the best places to enter a trade for maximum profit and minimum risk. And then we learn to exit. And here we learn when to exit a trade, whether it's by taking profit or by minimizing our risk with a stop loss. Both of those would be considered an exit, in my opinion. And finally, we conquer our mindset and trading psychology. So now that we understand trading, we work on our trading psychology so that we make decisions rationally and stick to our plan no matter the results. Learning to disconnect from the outcome is a life lesson that helps in trading as well as life. Here's some important points to think about with all of these steps. So the first is that we have to take one stage at a time. Each stage builds on the previous, and we cannot skip a stage. Skipping a step is only going to delay our learning. And we have to do them in the correct order. So working on stage 4, like working on psychology, for example, before you've mastered how to enter a trade, that is just going to waste your time and it's not going to give you the results that you want. The next is to appreciate each stage. So each stage is important and necessary, and we need to take our time and appreciate the learning process. So don't try to rush and get out of the first stage because it's uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable. Just accept it and appreciate it. You are on this learning journey and let it take however long it's going to take. And then the fifth is just keep going. The first stage of learning can be painful and uncomfortable, and it's normal. And maybe if you realize where you are and understand that it's normal, everybody feels uncomfortable in those first stages, then it'll help you to keep going to the next stage. So here are some things that are specific to trading compared to other skills. The knowledge required for trading is not necessarily wide in breadth, so you don't need to be really smart. You don't need to learn books worth of stuff. You don't need to study and memorize tons of facts. It's actually a small amount of stuff that you need to know. The content or the knowledge that is necessary is pretty simple and it's finite. It's not all that big. But the experience necessary for discretionary trading is immense. You need a lot of experience for discretionary trading. And I'll mention right here, just in case if you don't know the difference. So discretionary trading is when you are making the decisions as you're looking at the chart and you're sort of going based off of your experience and your intuition of what you think is going to happen, versus systematic trading is you have a checklist, and whenever this checklist is fulfilled, then you enter a trade. So it's more sort of computer analytical kind of trading. Another point is that practice can take the form of watching the market and participating in the market. Both of those practice pieces are needed. The mindset training or the psychology portion, that can take longer than all of the previous steps. It's a big part of it. Here's an example of learning trading. So it's called the Turtle Traders, and you may have heard of it. It's not actually turtles, but it was this guy named Richard Dennis, who was a legendary commodity trader, and he ran an experiment that he started in 1983. He believed that trading was a skill that could be taught with discipline. He did say you have to have discipline. You can't just teach anybody if they don't have discipline. So what he did was he put an ad in the newspaper and interviewed people, and he picked 13 students, and he called his students turtles. So that's where the turtle name comes from. He picked 13 the first year, and then he picked 10 the next year. And he did a 4-year program that started with 2 weeks of classroom fundamental trading. And I think that's important that it only took 2 weeks to train them in the classroom, because that tells us that the content knowledge that you need in order to start trading is only about 2 weeks worth of content. And then they continued for the rest of the 4 years, and he taught them a system of rules to follow. So he himself, Richard Dennis, was a discretionary trader, and he had tons of years of experience in order to trade that way. But what he did was he created a system of rules that he gave to his turtles and told them, this is how you trade. When you see this, you enter. When you see that, you exit. And that's important because that doesn't take quite as long to learn as the discretionary part takes. So of these 23 turtles that he trained, 3 of them quit before the end of the 4-year program. 1 of them moved on to a new field, and 19 were successful traders. 16 of them traded publicly and 3 on their own. And these 16 traders that traded publicly, they had a return rate of 80%, which is really good. So he kind of proved that, yes, it can be taught. And I think this is really interesting because whenever you look at the statistics as a whole for traders, it's a very low percentage that actually make it and end up profitable. But he showed that given the right training and so long as they they kept at it for 4 years, they were able to make it. To talk further about these turtle traders, there was another person that wrote an article in 2016, and he sort of studied how they learned, and he also did a study on how traders in general learn to trade and how the psychological factors affect learning. And here are some of the things that he found in his study. He found that once the traders in Dennis's experiment were able to think of themselves as simply following a set of rules rather than emotionally investing in each trade, it became much easier for them to disconnect their emotions from their trading. That's how the way that they were following the rules was helping them, because like if I follow the rules and it doesn't work, then oh well, it didn't work this time. And if I followed the rules and it worked, it's not a reflection of me. It's not a reflection of my worth or of how good I am. It's just these rules and I can disconnect from them. So that might help. Another thing he said was that one of the major challenges in trading is dealing with how emotions affect judgment. So we're seeing again that the emotional part is a major part of trading. Part of learning to trade is getting a feel for how to filter this, what to look at, and when. He did a survey to ask people what they thought was like the most important thing, and that was one of the things that came back. And then from all the work reviewed in the literature review and from the comments of the traders, one of the hardest things about learning to trade is understanding your own reactions to the market situations and managing those reactions. So again, with the psychology. He also said that the work in this thesis supports the idea that learning to trade can be helped by structuring your trading experience through an explicit process, because in this way you can measure your reactions and the consequences, and by sharing that experience with a mentor for ongoing procedural learning, feedback about and correction of your reactions. So we will use this particular advice later on in our experiment as we're trying to improve our trading. But I thought all of this was really interesting because it tells us what's the important part about learning to trade. And another thing that he said, a quote that was in this guy's article that I really liked, is he said, "We have met the enemy and he is us." So the biggest thing that holds us back from being profitable traders is our own emotions and us not being able to control them. That's it for this first portion of the scientific approach to learning to trade. I hope you join me for the next one. Part 2, we're going to talk about strategic goals and planning.